Hi everyone, I'm Ben, and this is the Board Game Blueprint. This week, we're going to take a quick look at PAX South, one of the infamous PAX conventions across the country, across the US, and this one especially has a focus on board games, a bit bigger than I was expecting. So let's jump on over to the Con Center next door and see what they have in store. PAX South was a pretty sweet convention, to say the least. Now, the main focus of most of the PAXs is that they are video game focused, but in the case of PAX South, the board game presence was actually pretty substantial. I want to say that maybe at least 20% of the booths were devoted to board games themselves, and then also they had a huge seating area for people to play all the board games that they either bought or checked out from the library. They also had a special section for maybe kind of hot upcoming games as well, but for me, I spent most of my time volunteering again with the Elf Creek Games group and showing off their most recent Kickstarter game, Atlantis Rising. Now, being a video game-based convention, of course, there were also tons of panels that I did not necessarily attend, but could have signed up for in advance. These were scattered all around the convention center, and I want to say even in the upstairs levels too, but most of my time was spent on the bottom floor, which is where you could walk around for hours, seeing all the different, not only main video game companies, but also the independent ones too. It was the first convention that I've been to that had sort of these pop-up booths, as it were, where you literally sat down to try out a game, a few rounds, and then get up, or if you were still standing, move on to the next. A really popular game was sort of a riff on Super Smash Bros., but with original characters and even some downloadable content with real celebrities, called Brawlhalla. There are also a couple augmented reality, virtual reality games, and just ones that were, as far as I could tell, cross-platform. As I was walking around, you can also expect the regular merch and nerd culture swag, which was really cool to say the least. But I should also mention that there was a special sort of Kickstarter-focused section too for board games, and ones that I had seen around the circuit were here and showing off too. The gaming was definitely open, and there were a number of people who walked around and picked up games right on the spot. The Elf Creek Games booth was directly across from a dice accessory business, and I may have spent a little bit more than I intended to this convention on that. From what I remember, PAX South was originally a board game convention, then switched to video games, and then PAX Unplugged became the mainly focused PAX convention about board games. Or maybe I got my stories mixed and the history was actually the other way around. But either way, I'm really glad that here especially, board games were so present. On a personal note, I got to meet a cool group called Love Thy Nerd through a playtesting session arranged by a friend who had their prototype mailed to them. It was really great to make some new friends and try out, again, a game design that is hopefully looking towards a crowdfunding campaign shortly, called Deliverance and published by Andrew Lowen. San Antonio is where the convention takes place. I could have opened with that probably, and it was just a great time. The weather was fantastically warm compared to the Midwest, which is where I'm from, and the food selection was pretty great around the convention center. In fact, we were super lucky in that the hotel that we were staying at was not even a 10-minute walk away if you didn't get lost. And it was a super stress-free convention compared to other ones that I've been to. But again, video games of all sorts, first-person shooters and Overwatch sort of competition, I believe, and oh yeah, just tons of screens for live streaming and whatnot. It was really, really neat, the sort of esports takeover being my first encounter with it at all. So if you wanted to give it a try, I don't believe the booths were too expensive, and it was great to see a couple other faces from the board game design community there. So if you ever find yourself in San Antonio, Texas, in January or so, you'll have a really good time at PAX South. Again, it really exceeded any expectations that I had, of which I had none, but it was a really great time and I was super wowed with the board game selection and just the accommodation that it had for that side of the hobby. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button so that you can stay up to date on future content like this. As always, I'm Ben. This has been another episode of the Board Game Blueprint, and together, let's build something great. No!